Welcome to Vampire Divorce with Attorney Clarke Young.
Hey everyone, welcome into an all-new episode of Vampire Divorce with Attorney Clarke Young. I am your host, Mike Leon. Clarke here is a seasoned family law attorney, consultant, expert witness who helps the courts, lawyers, families understand the reality of borderline personality disorder, especially when it comes to custody cases. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about how to educate the court. Clarke's going to explain how to translate the psychology of a borderline divorce into orders that a judge can really enforce. Clarke, it's good to see you as always on these. Let me ask you, because we've talked about this in previous episodes. Why is it difficult for judges to recognize what is actually happening in a borderline custody case?
Mike, thanks for having me. That is a fantastic question. I'm really glad we're starting with that one. Here's the deal. Most attorneys who become judges went to law school because they wanted to practice law. They didn't do it to practice psychology. And in a way, I'm making big demands on judges because I'm asking them to really get into and understand the nature of the psychological issue that's driving the divorce and the conflict. So I can understand why they don't really want to wade into that, and they always want to just have a child custody evaluator just, do the hard work and then make a recommendation that they can rubber stamp. But they still have to have an understanding about what is really going on, because the child custody evaluator is only going to be there once testifying, has a report that's probably worthless, and then you're back dealing with the judge. So the judge, there's a second factor. Imagine that all day long, 5 days a week, you're sitting there listening to somewhere between 20 and 40 matters that come before you, where you're getting to hear the absolute most primitive, bestial sorts of information about everybody's broken family and everybody's broken marriage and relationship. And it's depressing. And I actually think that a lot of the judicial officers in the family courts are emotionally bankrupt. I think that they have absolutely no emotional resilience anymore, and that when these cases come before them, they have almost a visceral rejection to actually look into the abyss, because these cases are the darkest of the cases that they're going to get. And so just going in, you have to understand that you're dealing with someone that doesn't want to hear it. They just want to play the three monkeys and move on to the next case, because you're only going to get 45 minutes anyway in LA court for anything practically. So the answer to that question is that there's several. Number one is your pleadings have to be absolutely A+ all the time. Every single thing that you put in writing has to be backed up by good evidence, and you have to build the court's confidence in your truthfulness and ability to be an accurate reporter and to tell the court and describe the behaviors that are negatively impacting the borderline's ability to parent effectively, which is frankly everything. I mean, one of the biggest challenges is that trying to get a judge to understand that when you say that so-and-so is a borderline, you are actually describing someone who is unable to parent. I mean, they are by definition not just poor parents, but terrible parents. But they don't know that. So that's another issue. When you're trying to get them to draft the orders that I've discussed in other sessions, you have to keep bringing in A game play, just unimpeachable evidence, and you have to prepare your client to testify properly, and you have to do everything right. You have to play the evidence game really well. You have to make sure the other party's junk evidence doesn't get in, and that only really competent, good evidence does get in. And that way you're just increasing the odds that you're going to get the order that you need and want.
Clarke, let me ask you, because we danced around it, but I would love for you to drill in a little bit more. What are some of the signs that a judge or the evaluator, they don't grasp at all the clinical dynamics that are ultimately driving the conflict? What are some of the signs that you immediately notice?
Well, first of all, let's do the child custody evaluator. Most of them are, and I'm going to be cruel here and make a lot of enemies probably, but most of them have master's degrees and don't really understand borderline personality disorder, so they don't really recognize it. I would go so far as to say that the only people who really understand borderline personality disorder are people who have been in an interpersonal relationship over a period of time with a borderline. Because for everybody else, they don't really know that vampires exist. They think they're just in books of fiction or in movies. But they don't understand that the reason we love vampire stories and are fascinated by vampires is because there are people who really are that way. When you understand the archetype that the vampire represents. So they don't understand that. So what happens initially with the child custody evaluator is that they're usually fooled by the borderline who presents so well and has very specific things and opinions about, what their spouse has done. And 90% of the time, the evaluator and the court will not realize that there's a projection confession happening. In other words, whenever a borderline accuses their spouse or partner of some sort of bad behavior, cheating on them, having secret bank accounts, abusing the children, whatever it may be, they're actually confessing what they've been doing. So but the judge and the child custody evaluator don't know that. So the best thing you can do is give the child custody evaluator the day in the life declaration that you drafted way back on day one. Again, that is the touchstone, that's the Bible, and that is something that is basically describing everything that has happened in this case. It's the big picture, it's the history, it's the present circumstance, it's the diagnosis, it's everything. It's how the borderline mistreats the spouse, mistreats the child. It's a description of what the child's life will look like if they live with the borderline versus if they live with the normal range parent. It's all these things at once. It's the whole universe. So you're going to give that, and I don't care if you have to do 2 3-ring binders that are each 5 inches thick with exhibits. You're going to give the evaluator on day one, when your client walks in for the initial intake, all of these materials, because you need the evaluator to understand from day one that they're not dealing with a normal case. And if they have any principles at all, and they don't know what they're doing, you have also, by the way, had an order that says if the child custody evaluator that the court appointed over your objections because they're not qualified realizes that they need to have another person involved, another professional, healthcare professional involved, they are ordered to get that help and then rely upon that other person. So you're going in, first of all, with those binders and the evidence and day of life declaration and updates to it. You want to make a good first impression. Then, let's say you don't have an order that the judge won't play ball because they don't think is a problem. They just want to do a quick and dirty child custody evaluation for $2,000-$3,000, then go back in and flip a coin and you're done, right? So, but if that happens, then the fallback position is that you have to go out, which you can do in I think every state, hire your own independent expert. So you have your expert who knows borderline personality disorder. You have the other person, the borderline, has to submit to a mental health evaluation. And then you take that before the child custody evaluation is completed, and you give that report and that diagnosis to that evaluator. And this is where you get into the PhD level of how you play this chess game, because most of the child custody evaluators who are not really qualified to do a psychological evaluation, when they get the psychological evaluation that you give them because they failed to do their job and go out and get someone who could, if the credentials of your expert are much, much better than the evaluators, they'll defer to that credentialed person. And so that's another way of checkmating the evaluators, so that they actually are held accountable to do what they should have done and are not capable of doing because they're not qualified to do it.
Yeah. Clarke, let me ask you, because I mentioned in the intro, you serve as an expert witness. So when you do that, what is your goal when you're doing it? Is it to diagnose? Is it to help the court understand, like you've been mentioning here, the behavior patterns in practical terms? What is your goal?
The purpose of any expert witness is to help educate the judge on a particular issue that exceeds the normal person, the man on the street's understanding of how the world works or some aspect of the world. So you can be in a case where you have all your other ducks lined up and still need someone like me or me to come in to testify, because my role is going to be to help educate the judge, about borderline personality disorder in terms of two things. One, I need to help translate the psychobabble that's in the child custody evaluation and in the psychological evaluation, so the judge understands that this is not just a minor issue, that it is the backdrop against which the whole passion play is being played out. So I have that role of helping them understand the psych eval. The second thing is I need to help them understand how to write an order that is going to checkmate and cover the borderline flare-up issues and the borderline parenting issues. And that's where we're back to writing that custody order that's going to be 35 to 45 pages long, and why that's a necessary thing. Most judges naively think that that's just going to be overkill or unnecessary, and they'll just do their boilerplate whatever, and that just won't work. So that's the role that I play. I need to make sure that the judge issues an order that's going to stop this case from being litigated every 3 to 4 months, because the judges what they really want is for all their cases to go away. That's what they really want. So they're going to kick the can down the road. They're going to take the easy way out, but they're not going to take the time up front that's necessary to make sure that the case is handled nicely, because they think it'll just go away somehow. When they realize that the case isn't going to go away, and you're not going to go away until you do something to save the children, Your Honor, then they step up to the plate. So that's another milestone in the case, when the court goes from get out of here, I don't want to hear all this, to okay, I guess I have to deal with this. That's a major milestone. So, and back to your question, the shorthand is that as an expert witness, I'm trying to get that court to get the case to go away. Really, if you want the case to go away, there's only one way to do it.
Right. Let me ask you, Clarke, as I've asked you on other episodes, what are some of the mistakes that you've seen lawyers or experts make that cause the judges that you've mentioned before to kind of either tune out or maybe potentially miss the point of what the lawyer or expert is trying to land?
Well, the experts and the judges have a very critical and I would even say cordial relationship most of the time. A lot of judges will appoint the same child custody evaluator or whoever it may be over and over again, because they've learned to trust them. They think they're doing a good job, and that may be true in a lot of cases, and they may not be qualified in a borderline case, and that's another hurdle you have to get over. So with the judge, and trying to get them, how can I say, to play ball. They are going to be hitting that wall initially. I mean, that's not an imaginary wall that comes up further down the pike. You have to go in with the assumption that the judge is not necessarily hostile, but not open-minded to how you're going to approach the case as an attorney. So, and I think it's critically important. Again, on day one, you start waving those red flags and telling the court what you're going to expect the court to do over the course of this case. And I think you can honestly say to the court, I don't expect you to get this on day one. And you were going to say to the court that day in the life declaration that's rather lengthy and has lots of exhibits. You need to read that before every hearing. I mean, just need to lay out the cheat sheet for the judge, because the judge needs to understand up front that this case is going to require some careful analysis and insightful analysis, and that's important. But everything else I said before really applies. The roles of what experts do you call? You're going to have the other party playing all kinds of games with witnesses and evidence and false allegations and all kinds of silly stuff. And the judge is going to keep getting distracted at first by those. That's sleight of hand magicianship that the borderlines do. And they're good magicians, by the way. So I hope that answers your question. But basically, you just have to keep educating them and going in over and over again with the same updated information, but the same pattern, the same themes, the same solution.
Yeah. Well, Clarke, as we land the plane on this episode, we've been talking about the court not getting it. So let's say the court finally does get it. In that instance, what changes for the children, the non-BPD parent, the tone of the entire case? What changes?
Well, once the judge, the light switch goes on for the judge, and the judge accepts their responsibility, and they see that the problem driving the discord is the borderline, then they suddenly become open. And I've said this happens in a number of cases. They finally see the light of day, and everything changes. Frankly, at that point, they may try to enter an order that's a halfway order, and they may be doing that because they actually want to test to see if the borderline is able to comply with a parallel parenting plan, if you will, right? An order that includes the parent and it's joint legal decision making, but in the event of a tie or a conflict, the normal parent gets to make the decision. Let's try that for a while. Well, you try that for a while, and eventually you go back in again and again, and the judge finally gets that it's not going to work that way. And they will go back to frankly, the all or nothing order, where they have to take the power away from the borderline, because you give one iota of power to a borderline, and the borderline will abuse that one iota of power. And until they get that, you're SOL. But when they get that, then they finally go, oh, okay, so I have to contain a pathogenic parent, which is what they are, and they start giving you the orders that you need. You won't get the 100% ideal order even then, but you'll close the gap to a point where the judge will see in another period of maybe 6 months that the order is not really working. It's kind of working, but the borderline is still doing everything she can to disrupt the child's education, their therapy, their extracurricular activities, parent alienation. All the things that were a problem before are still a problem, but the borderline is getting more subversive, and that's, they go underground a bit on the pathogenic parenting, and you have to go in one more time perhaps, then the judge lowers the boom. Yeah. But it's always the same thing. You keep telling the truth, high quality evidence, and you keep pushing the judge to do the right thing.
Clarke, thank you as always for the time, insights. I appreciate it, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
And that's it for today's episode of Vampire Divorce. If you want to reach out to Clarke or connect with him, do me a favor, visit clarkeyoung.com to find out more about the work that he does in this area. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a review and comment, or share the episode with someone who needs to hear it. I'm Mike Leon. We'll see everybody next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.